Wonderful. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Laura Winnie, and I'm the Education and Community Engagement Coordinator for the DuPage County Animal Services. So today we are going to talk about choosing a pet professional. Any of us know as pet owners, pet guardians, whichever term you prefer, that there are going to be times when we need expert advice or opinions to help take care of our pets. None of us is going to be 1000% perfect and an expert on any one of our pets, right? There's always going to be someone out there that knows more. Plus, there's always continuing studies. So even the professionals are learning more every single day. And finding that someone who's going to help provide information for us to help us be better pet owners can be a little overwhelming. So through this presentation, we're going to talk about different professionals and what kind of things we should be asking to assess the quality of the professionals that we're looking for. Now, before I dive deep, just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat box at any time, but just know that I'm not going to look at the chat box until the very end. Everyone is currently set to mute with their video off. We are recording this so I can update the YouTube page after today for anybody who may have missed this presentation. So please keep yourselves muted so we don't have any audio interference. And like I said, if at any point you have questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat box. Right now, I'm going to throw the link to our program survey into the chat. If at any point you can take a spare minute to give us some feedback, we'd really appreciate it. We're always looking for information on how we're doing, what we could improve on, and also ideas for what you guys would like to see in the future. So let's go ahead, now that that housekeeping stuff is out of the way, and dive deep into those common pet professionals and how to choose them. First, let's start off with our most common pet professional that we're going to encounter, and that's going to be our veterinarians. Now, of course, veterinarians, we know they're here to help us treat, to see medical disorders, injuries, and our animals. Typically, when we're looking for a veterinarian, you need to find one that specializes in your specific animal. So when you think about veterinarians, most of them are going to fall under that companion animal category. And that is a little bit narrower than what people realize. Companion animal basically means cats and dogs. Other pets, even though they're very, very common, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, birds, those are going to fall under exotic veterinarians. So any reptiles, anything, basically anything besides those cats and dogs, you're going to need to go to a specialized vet exotic. And they do tend to be a little bit more expensive than those companion vets. It's a little bit narrower choices when you're looking for budget-friendly veterinarians. And it can be a little bit of a challenge. I recommend, when you're looking, if you have those more exotic animals, when you're looking for a veterinarian, make sure that you're talking to the veterinarian about what their background is. And we'll get more into that later. But thinking about how the exotic vets cover such a wide array of animals, it's important to know for your comfort what their comfort level is with your particular pet type. Okay. Now, there are also wildlife veterinarians out there, but they're more specifically going to be associated with zoos or wildlife rehabilitation centers like Willowbrook Wildlife Center here in DuPage County. And since it is illegal to keep wildlife in your home, hopefully nobody is seeking the services of that for an animal that is residing in their household. Hopefully everybody's staying on the awesome side of the law here, okay? Now, what people don't realize is just like human doctors, veterinarians can go into additional specialties. So not just the species, but also types of illnesses. So they can look into behavioral issues, oncology or cancer. There are additional levels of schooling that our veterinarians can go for. And should you have an animal that is in need of a particular specialty, again, that field narrows quite a bit. And unfortunately, that the price goes up as well as that field narrows. Just like with human doctors, you're going to see that. Now, at DuPage County Animal Services, we recommend that all animals living in human care see a veterinarian at least once a year minimum. And that's to get any vaccines that are recommended or required by law, those wellness checks, because those wellness checks not only are really important for preventative medicine, but it helps establish that baseline. So if something changes in your animal, it can be really subtle. Pets are amazingly good at hiding when they are sick or even injured. So you may not even notice a change in behavior, but something's going on that a vet is better qualified to find. And it could be an indicator of a long-term or a short-term problem, and you can nip that right in the bud. So those wellness checks, even when everything's great and you don't have any concerns, it's always great to make sure that there's nothing hidden or creeping up that needs to be addressed before it becomes a serious issue. And of course, everybody's worst day is the emergency visits and the end of life care. So it's important to have that established relationship with your vet so that they understand what is normal for your animal and what is not, because there are some animals that their behavior will change drastically when they get towards that end of life field or area. And a veterinarian that has known your pet for an extended amount of time is going to better understand what's going on and better able to interpret those signs. And just besides the emergency issues and the sad visits, there's so much more that a veterinarian can provide for us. They are going to be the go-to person when looking for enrichment ideas. So ways that we can help our animals lead fuller, happier lives while they're in our care. Nutritional advice. Are there any particular studies that have been done recently that show, oh, this percentage of hay is much better than this percentage of hay, and they recommend a change in diet because of that? There's keeping up on that. Part of your veterinarian's license includes continuing education. So understanding that they don't just, graduate from school in the 1980s and then stop learning. It's a continuous process. And like I said before, there are always studies being done on companion and exotic animals. So we're learning more and more every single year about these animals. Now, when we think about animal trainers, the main function of an animal trainer is to help create a relationship between the people and the animal. So they will typically specialize with a very specific species. And the most common one that we think of is dog, right? We think of dog trainers, but there are other species trainers out there. They're a little bit more rare, but they're out there. Any fans of Jackson Galaxy? He's a cat trainer. He specializes in cats. That's his thing. He is known as Hollywood's cat daddy. And there are also bunny trainers. Side note, just because I just recently found this out when I started working here, there's actually like bunny agility sports where people train their rabbits to go through the agility things, just like they do for dogs, like you might see on ESPN on a really slow day. And there are trainers for that, which I think is fabulous. So the more you know, right? And It's important that when you think about trainers, not only understanding, yeah, there's going to be the different species, okay, but there's also going to be a wide variety in their background, their experience, their training philosophies, and their handling techniques. And that is key. And we will talk a lot more about that later when we're talking about how to choose from them. So generally, trainers will have different approaches. They might have group classes. So if you've ever been to PetSmart or Petco and you walk in and you see a giant circle of people all with their puppies, group class, right? Basic training, basic manners for puppies. That's going to be a group class. One-on-one is becoming more and more popular, and virtual it took off in the pandemic, and I'm pretty sure it's here to stay because everyone is seeing how effective it is. You know, so many people think, well, how can you help me with my dog if you're not physically present with my dog? These are the experts that know dog behavior. So they don't need to see the behavior to understand it. And a key factor there is remembering that practice makes permanent. So trainers don't necessarily want to see the behavior that we don't want, because that's just encouraging our animals to do a behavior we don't want, right? So hearing about it is enough for them to give guidance on how to avoid it in the future. There are also those trainers that do board and train. So the dog comes to them. This is typically for dogs, not, as far as I know, not for any other species, but for dogs, dropped off either for a day, overnight, couple days, and the trainer works either with a group of dogs or individually with the dog on particular behaviors that they're looking for. Maybe it's basic manners, maybe it's reactivity, when dogs go crazy when they see other dogs, something like that. And then the owner person comes and picks them up at the end of the session, gets some feedback on what they worked on and how to continue that training on at home. Now, a key factor that I mentioned with that background and experience is anybody can call themselves a dog trainer. There is no regulating body that makes certain that Joe Schmo down the street, dog trainer, actually has certifications or education that back up their methods and what they're doing. And also, a trainer, a behavior consultant, and a behavioralist are very, very different things. So trainers are going to be pretty much that basic tier. They're going to be working on those basic behaviors, come when called, tricks, some behavior things, but it's going to be like the beginner stuff. Okay. Now, a behavior consultant is going to go up one. So I mentioned Jackson Galaxy, and he's actually a cat behavioral consultant. So don't want to get that confused. He's that upper level with cats than you would see just with training. He's at upper level. Now, they do have education that goes beyond an animal trainer. And you want to make sure that if you are working with a behavioral consultant, again, the further up this chain you go, the more expensive it's going to be. So you want to make sure that you're getting what you pay for. So having a certificate or an advanced degree is crucial if you are looking at a behavioral consultant. So the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants is one, couple others that they could go for, but that's the most common one. And what I like about IAABC is they do have a searchable thing on their website, so you can find certified behavior consultants in your area, which is nice. Now, with behavioral consultants, like I said, it's that higher tier. So these are going to be things that are a little bit more or even a lot more complicated than what a trainer would take on. Anxiety issues, fear responses, separation anxiety, maybe isolation distress. That's when the animal, if you've seen like on Facebook, the memes where animals start chewing through doors because they are so frantic when they are left alone. If you have an animal that's chewing through a door, that's not trainer level. That's upper level. That's something you want to look at with a behavior consultant. Compulsive behaviors. So some animals lick continuously until they actually create open wounds on their bodies. So that can be a compulsive disorder. Resource guarding is a big one because that can be cause for alarm, not only amongst other animals, but also the humans in the household. So if your dog, most likely it's going to be a dog, is eating and you walk by and they start growling and maybe air snapping, you know, they're trying to protect their food, even though you're not even really anywhere near it. So that's considered resource guarding. Resource guarding doesn't have to be food, though. It's anything they consider important. A person, the house, the backyard, the couch. I had one foster dog who hated when my dogs came anywhere near the couch, and she was very, very snippy about that. So any other forms of aggression that you might be seeing in your animal, whether it's been a slow road and it's just been getting worse and worse and worse, or if it's a behavior that's come up out of the blue, these are things that you might work with a behavioral consultant to identify the cause and then come up with an action plan. Behavioralist, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because those are like the top tier for the really special cases. Those are veterinarians that have gone on and taken an additional degree. So those are the veterinarians that were like, you know what? All those thousands of dollars I spent on vet school was not enough. Let me get some more. There's only 2 in the entire Chicagoland area. So that's how top tier those are. And they will often work with the animal and have it in line with a medication. So that's, if you're thinking about it in human terms, that's the psychiatrist versus the psychologist, right? They're the ones that can prescribe the meds to help with any chemical imbalances going on in the brain. Now, another common professional that we'll deal with is a groomer. So these are skilled professionals that deal with hygiene. Now, typically there's going to be 2 main kinds. There's going to be the brick and mortar businesses. So they have a location, you bring your animal to them. Or there's the mobile kind. They come to you and they have facilities in a van or a bus or whatever it happens to be. Now, services do vary widely by location and by the comfort level of the professionals. But typically, you're going to see bathing, brushing, haircuts, nail trims, and then they also may offer teeth brushing and the anal glands. And I have those starred because it's not really recommended to use a groomer for those particular needs. And there's a couple reasons why. Just like with human teeth, dogs need regular brushing to make a difference. So if you are only having the groomer that your dog sees twice a year, once a year, do that teeth brushing, at that point, it's not even worth it. It would be like if we only brushed our teeth when our dental hygienist did it at our checkup. 1, really nasty, right? And 2, is it really going to help you with cavities at that point if you're only brushing your teeth twice a year? No, it's an additional stress that you don't really need to put your dog through. Instead, there are so many guides online. Highly recommend that you look into how you can take care of your dog's dental and cat's dental health on your own. Rabbits have their own thing. They're not necessarily getting their teeth brushed, but you definitely want to make sure that they have lots of things to chew on to keep their teeth nice and trim. You don't want their teeth to get too long because their teeth do grow continuously. So that's something to keep an eye on. That's true for our little rodent friends and our guinea pigs as well. Now, anal glands is a dog thing. So it's 2 little glands on either side of the opening of the anus, and they're inside, they're internal. And basically what happens is it releases a scent every time the dog defecates. And for the most part, when a dog poops, it releases and expresses, so it gets the juices out of those anal glands all on its own. For a lot of dogs, that's it. They don't have to worry about it, no problem. For some dogs, their process isn't, for lack of a better term, good enough. It's not expressing the anal glands, and that fluid can start to build up. That oily substance starts to build up. And you might start to notice your dog scooting their butt along the carpet, which is always super fun and disgusting. That's a sign that there's a problem with the anal glands. You might smell a really gross, distinctive fishy smell coming from either the dog or the place they were just sitting. That's a sign that the anal glands are having issues. Most of the time, groomers will do what's called an external expression, and that's where they're squeezing from outside to get the glands out, to get the glands to release the fluids. The problem with the external expression is it can cause more harm. It can make it even more difficult for the animal to express their glands in the future if done incorrectly. And while groomers are professionals with training, they're not veterinarians. They haven't gone to vet school. They haven't done all those years of schooling. So if your dog is having issues with their anal glands, the vet is where you should go, because a vet can do what's called an internal expression. And that's exactly what it sounds like. They are sticking their finger up where the sun don't shine to help get those glands expressed. And then the veterinarian can help give ideas, advice on how to help your dog in the future. So maybe they don't need this every single time. So while teeth brushing and anal glands are services provided by groomers, I would recommend against it, simply because with the teeth brushing, it's an unnecessary stress and it's not doing a whole lot of good anyway if you're not doing regular teeth brushing. And with the anal glands, it can cause harm if someone who doesn't know what they're doing is trying to do it. So best leave that to the professionals, the veterinarians and the vet techs. Another common professional that we're going to see is pet sitters. Again, most people are pretty familiar with who pet sitters are. They're a person that comes to care for the pets while the owner is away. So this could be a long-term thing. Maybe they're even house sitting. They're staying in your home while you're on vacation or out of town for work. And sometimes they also provide care in their own home. So your pets go to their house. I have worked with pet sitters that will do a couple of visits during the day. So the pets stay in their own home, but the pet sitter is not staying there. They just come and, you know, clean litter or change bedding, do potty walks, whatever, and then they go home and the pets are there on their own at night. There's no like regulatory system for pet sitters, so there is no like an umbrella definition for what a pet sitter will or will not provide. This is something that you're going to have to establish with each individual. Never assume that because you had a pet sitter that was comfortable giving injectable medicines that your next pet sitter is going to be comfortable with it. Have that conversation. Typically, all pet sitters will offer the feeding and watering, providing exercise of some kind, and tidying up. But again, you want to have an open and clear conversation with them about what those expectations are. If it's just a matter of, oh, somebody tinkled on the floor, I'm going to use some paper towels to clean it up, versus somebody had really bad diarrhea on the living room carpet and now I'm busting out the rug shampooer. You know, these are questions to have with your pet sitter to see, okay, yes, I know where things are. I know how to use them. That's fine. Or, ooh, no, I don't, maybe we should roll up the rugs because I don't know how to do that. Okay. And the same goes for different species and different breeds. So hiring someone that has Chihuahuas in their home doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be comfortable with your Bernese Mountain Dog or your Great Dane. So this is all very highly individualized, and a lot of it just comes through the interview, which we will go more in depth later. Don't be afraid of being rude. You really want to understand what the pet sitter knows and is comfortable with when you're looking for one. So again, with the dogs, you're going to be looking at possibly doggy daycare facilities. They are similar to daycare for kids. You drop your dog off, they have playtime, maybe they have snack, they have nap time, they have playtime again, and you pick them up again at the end of the day, and theoretically everybody is exhausted and happy, and you go home and it's nap time again, right? That's the goal of doggy daycare. Typically, the costs are going to be between $20 and $40 a day. It can be a little bit higher than that, depending on what facility you're looking at. And the bonus of doggy daycare is if you have a long work schedule or a very high energy dog, it combats boredom of them being at home in your house, maybe in a crate all day long with nothing to do. It also provides great opportunities for social enrichment. So getting out and seeing other dogs, having fun, playing, making new friends. And the services that are provided at doggy daycares really, really vary by location. So that's something to understand. Most of them will list their services and their fee structure right on their websites. So daycare, obviously, that's drop off in the morning, pick up in the afternoon or early evening. Boarding, so they'll stay there overnight. They'll have overnight staff and also do the daycare during the day. They might provide training. Remember that drop off training that we talked about before with dog trainers. They might have dog trainers on staff. They may have grooming facilities. They also might provide other enrichment services. So I used to take my dogs to a daycare when we lived in Tampa. And one of the things that I loved about that daycare was they provided scent enrichment every day. Every day was a new scent that they provided to the dogs, whether by a diffuser or in little sniffy cups that they had that the dogs could find. I have hounds, so that was a huge, huge thing for them. That's something that they really loved. And as you can see in the background of this photo, they might have different equipment for your animal to explore and have fun with. So it really does vary by the location, what they're going to have, and also what their staff is comfortable with doing. So, okay, we talked about our professionals, different types. So now here's the kicker. How do we pick them? Because if you just put into Google dog groomer, you're going to get an insane amount of options. And how do we narrow that down? Well, there are a couple of ways to do that. I am a huge fan of looking for fear-free or low-stress certified professionals. So the low-stress handling is from Dr. Sophia Yen, and she was a huge, huge influence in understanding dog behavior and how animal handling techniques can shape your relationship with that animal. So she's really the mom of this low stress handling idea. The fear-free is more recent. So that started in 2016. And while both of them are certification programs, the fear-free takes it just a little bit further, because not only do they provide training and information for professionals, but they also have a lot of resources on their website for pet owners, which is absolutely fabulous. So if you have an animal that is suffering from particular anxiety issues. They have a wealth of information on their website. It's Fear Free Pets. You can just go there and find it. What I also like about Fear Free, more so than the low stress, is that Fear Free, you can put in your zip code and find certified individuals or certified practices right here in the area, which is absolutely wonderful. And you can look for groomers, veterinarians, and trainers. The low stress handling, typically people will have it advertised on their website if their staff members are certified in that, whether it's an individual or the practice, but I couldn't find a centralized database. Maybe there is one, but I could not find one that lets you figure out who near me has this certification, but they will advertise it if they have it. And it's amazing what a difference it makes when you have professionals that are looking after the emotional and mental well-being of your animals versus just the physical. Because reducing that stress and fear and anxiety that is inherent in a trip to the vet, nobody likes going to the doctor, especially our pets, right? It lets them better assess the animal's physical state, you know, when they're not cowering in a corner, freaking out because this place is big and scary and I don't like these people. It's going to get a better physical exam. It's also going to prevent the animal from acting out defensively. So I know this from personal experience. I have a cat that in my previous place where I lived, she bit our vet because our vet did not have this certification. I did not know about this certification at the time. My vet reached into the carrier, grabbed her, and started to pull her out. That was incredibly scary for my cat, and she defended herself. And then my tiny, tiny 7-pound cat got a reputation of being a tiny little terror, which was very, very sad. We are now at a Fear Free certified, and she does not have that issue anymore. She is labeled a good kitty every single time because they're not doing super scary, unnecessary things to her. They are paying attention to her body language. They are giving her breaks when she needs it, and they're not handling her roughly. They are really tuned in to her mental and emotional well-being to make sure that she is comfortable with what's going on. So beyond looking at certifications, how do we assess a veterinary hospital? One way is to go there without your pet, you know, establish a rapport, ask questions, and we have a whole list of them on the next slide, and look around, ask for a tour. You know, you want to see, is that facility clean? Is it organized? Are the staff members happy to be there, or are they miserable? Because if they're miserable, they may be overworked. It may be a very stressful environment due to the supervisors, the higher ups that work there, or they may just not like their jobs, and maybe that's not a place you want to go to. Can you see the staff, how they handle animals? Okay, so in this picture, we have very nice, friendly handling, low stress handling, and I would be comfortable with these people as my veterinarians. You know, you can tell that they are paying attention, that they're looking to see what's going on with this cat. They're not forcefully, you know, holding them by the nape of their neck. They're not, you know, have them bundled up in a towel, forcing their limbs into awkward positions. So that's a great thing to see as well. How do the staff treat other people's animals? Because that's going to be how they treat yours. Do the clients, do the pet owners look happy? You know, are they in a good mood? Are they joking around? Are they, you know, leaving with smiles on their faces? That is a huge key. So when we're asking our questions, big thing is we want to make sure that it is accredited by AAHA. Okay, so that is the American Animal Hospital Association. And the important thing about that is that it means they are allowing an overseeing organization to come into their facility and assess it for excellence. So they're looking at, proper disease management, appropriate disinfection, sanitation protocols, how they're handling animals. Is it safe? Is it efficient? Things like that. You want to have someone that's looking over the shoulders of your professionals to make sure that everybody's staying up at that bar, right? We want to make sure that everybody's staying up with those professional standards. You want to know how many veterinarians are on staff. Some of the bigger clinics can have 5, 10 more veterinarians that are on staff. Some of the private ones, only 1 or 2. How important is it for you that every time you call in for an appointment, you're going to get the same veterinarian? Maybe it's not. If your animals are in generally good health and it's not a big deal, and that's not something that's your priority, perfect. For one of my animals, for my cat, I don't really care. She's generally low maintenance health-wise, and I'm perfectly fine with her seeing veterinarians, again, as long as we all do the stress-free handling there. But with my dogs, they have allergies, and I like to have that baseline with one veterinarian so that she knows what to look for and she's familiar with that. What is the philosophy of care that they have? And if they can't tell you a philosophy of care, that's going to be a really big red flag, because that should be the reason they're there, is providing care for animals. Okay. Now, does the staff participate in continuing education? For a lot of this accreditation, it's required of the veterinarians, but it's also nice for other staff members, even front desk, to be able to get that education as well. Do they have an emergency service right there? Or do they have a recommendation for someone else? So after hours, what do you do? My vet, I called the same number, but they don't have after hours. It forwards me to somebody that does, which is a very nice service. So I only have to know the one number and I can get help with that one phone number programmed in my phone. What about behavioral support? Do you have a behavioralist on staff? Like I said, probably not, because there's only 2 in the Chicagoland area, but they might have some behavioral consultants or someone that has taken continuing education in behavior. Do they refer patients to specialists? So those oncologists, those physical therapists, those who specialize in joints and bones, which I'm blanking on the name of that right now. But if your dog needs a tendon replaced, does your vet have that specialty, or do they have a referral with a relationship already? How are overnight patients monitored? Some vets need their overnight patients transferred to an emergency services because that's not something they provide. Others provide it right on site. So that's something to know. And then what kind of equipment do they have? Does everything look nice? Does it look like it came from the 70s? Does it look like it came from a horror movie in the 70s? Red flags. If they're not spending money on equipment, where is that money going, right? So depending on your comfort level with understanding medical procedures, it can also be good to know, how are patients evaluated before anesthesia and surgery? So if you have older animals especially, what are they doing to make sure that any necessary surgery or anesthesia is not going to cause further complications? And then what is their protocol for pain management? Do they use other non-drug types? Do they have any recommendations for that? That can be very important for some people, not as important for others. Now, here in the Chicagoland area, we do have several low-cost clinics that I just wanted to give a little bit of shout out to. They're available for your typical standard care. They don't really have any specialists as far as I know, and they are all brick and mortar facilities, but except for one, we do have a traveling veterinarian, and they are helped along with state-funded programs. So for us, it's Adopt Pet Shelter, Spay Illinois, Anderson Animal Shelter, the Fox Valley Animal Welfare League, excuse me, and Just Animals Wellness Clinic. So they're going to be able to do those basic things, spay-neuter surgeries, vaccinations, microchips, wellness exams, the heartworm test, the feline leukemia test for cats. They may be able to provide flea, tick, and heartworm prevention. They may also be able to go a little bit over and do things like dental surgeries. So a little bit more complicated. It just depends on the location. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is they do tend to have longer waiting times. And typically you're not going to be able to see a consistent veterinarian every single time. But again, that may not necessarily be an important factor for you. Getting the best possible care for your budget might be the biggest factor for you. And I completely understand. You go. And being aware of if you are using different facilities based on what their timelines are, then that's going to be a little bit more on you to maintain those records, right? So if something happens and you need Fido's medical records, you're not going to be able to just call one person and be like, hey, send me everything over. If you are going to multiple facilities based on their availability and their pricing and whatnot, that's going to be on you to be a little bit more organized so you have all of that in one location. That's my tip to you, because we see that a lot at the animal shelter. People will call us and they need their vaccination records for whatever reason, and they don't remember which one they went to or the last time they went, and they don't know when it's due. So when you're going to multiple clinics, try to be your best Marie Kondo and keep it as organized as possible. So when we're looking into those trainers and those behavioralists, start with an accredited organization. See who's in the area. You can also go to your veterinarian and ask them for recommendations, and then also ask for word of mouth. Do any of your friends, family, neighbors have experience with trainers? Go to Google reviews, Yelp. Look to see what people are saying about the results and also the philosophies and the handling techniques. Now, those behavioral consultants and behavioralists can also be found through those accredited organizations, but a really big thing there is going to be getting referrals, because that, like I said, they're a more specialized field. They're a little bit more expensive. You really want to make sure that you're going to get the value for what you're paying for them. So if you've been working with a trainer and they say, hey, you know, I'm sorry, this is a little bit out of my league, but this person is really good, that's gold. If you can get a recommendation from a trainer who already knows your animal, that's going to be awesome. But you can feel free to do your own research and shop around. Okay. Word of mouth is a huge, huge thing for our trainers, our behavioral consultants, and our behavioralists. Now, what do we want to ask when we are looking for these professionals? We want them to discuss their training philosophy and the equipment that they use. Oftentimes this goes hand in hand. At DuPage County Animal Services, we believe in LIMA training. So that's least intrusive, minimally aversive. And basically what that means is we are going to try to find the least negative option, the most positive option for getting the behavior we want. So that's going to be using positive reinforcement, environmental management, basically preventing behaviors from starting in the first place before we go to something that causes pain or harm. You know, those are last resort, because there are so many other ways to get the behaviors you're looking for. So if you have someone that says, oh, I believe in dominance theory. Dominance theory has been debunked over and over again because of its idea that we need to use fear, coercion, and unpleasant ways to get our animals to know, quote, who's boss. Our dogs know we're not dogs. Our dogs know that they are, right? I mean, they don't have this very complicated pack hierarchy like it was thought of many years ago. Instead, it's much more fluid than that. And those trainers who stick with this outdated philosophy are also using outdated techniques and outdated equipment, such as prong collars, choke collars, shock collars, choke leashes. And this equipment can cause a lot of injury and harm. And for the most part, it's not very effective. It can suppress a behavior in the moment, but it's not going to lead to long-term change. Those positive reinforcement Lima techniques are going to change how an animal feels about a situation to change the outcome of a particular situation. So that's going to be the most efficient long-term solution to a particular behavior problem. You want to ask, how long have they been training? Is this their first job? Did they, work at a pet store and they decided to take on training? Okay, that's kind of a red flag, right? You want someone who knows what they're doing. What about their education? Have they been certified? Have they gone through one of the dog training schools, of which there are many? Do they continue that education? What do they do? Do they participate in professional organizations? You also want to ask if you can speak to a former client, or if they have written testimonials from former clients. How do people who paid for that service feel about it? Did they get what they paid for? Did they get the results that they wanted? For board and train, where you're dropping off the animal and coming back later, you definitely want to have a tour of that facility to see what it looks like. Is it clean? Is it organized? Just like with our vet clinics, right? Can we see the staff handling the animals? Because if you're trying to get an animal that's afraid of things and the staff at this board and train is manhandling your animals, for lack of a better term, that may not be the best solution. Probably not, actually. So asking to observe a training session, even if you're not involved, maybe you're behind inside and they're outside in the yard, or vice versa, to understand what's going on with your animal when you're not going to be there. How are you going to be involved in the training session? So for those one-on-one classes, what's my process? What are we doing? For those group classes, how much attention am I going to be able to get in those group classes? How many people are in those group classes? Is it 20? Because for an hour long, that's what, 5 minutes for you? 4 minutes? Sorry, math is not my strong suit. So that's not a lot of one-on-one time when dealing with an animal. What's that process going to look like? Okay, what are your plans for this particular thing? And also, how long before I see results? This is kind of a trick question, because the answer shouldn't be solid, because every animal is an individual, every person is an individual, so therefore every training is going to be individualized. So if you are working with a trainer and they say, oh, we'll have that behavior cut out in 3 sessions, it'll be done, it'll be gone. That's a red flag, because a lot of stuff can happen in 3 sessions. So you want something a little bit more aware. You want someone that's a little bit more aware of how individualistic this is, okay, and how fluid it can be. So a good answer would be, oh, well, typically we see improvement after 2 sessions. And then by the 6th session, this is where I hope to be, right around there, maybe give or take a session or 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, so they're relying on past experience, relating it to your particular situation, and giving a timeline, but not a deadline. Okay. Now, what happens after the training is done? Are you going to be able to continue that training? Are you going to be able to reach out to them for support Once you do your training, let's say you sign up for a 10-session package. At the end of that 10 sessions, is that it? Are they going to ghost you? Or do they have follow-up available? You know, what does that process look like for their clients? Switching back on over to our groomers, it is so huge to get word of mouth, because this is such a personal experience, right? It's helping our animals look and feel their best. So make sure that you're talking to family and friends and other pet owners. Look at their pet. Does their pet look good? Does their pet look disastrous? Then you don't want to go to that one, right? What about your vet or your trainer? If you're new to the area, talk to your neighbors. Who do they use? And of course, go to the internet for reviews. My recommendation, don't just focus on the 5 and 1 stars. Read somewhere in the middle, okay? Because that's typically going to be more what is realistic anyway. And the things that annoy other people may not be a problem for you. Like, oh, this place is never open on Saturdays. Okay, well, you want your dogs to be groomed on Mondays. No big deal. So something that would cost a star to someone else may not be a problem for you. When you are going to these brick and mortar facilities and even the mobile groomers, you do want to take a tour of their facility. You want to see what it looks like. It needs to be clean. It needs to be organized. And if they are grooming multiple species, how are they separated? Because cramming everybody into a bunch of cages that face each other is going to be super stressful for your animals and possibly facilitate disease transmission. You know your pets, you don't know everybody else's pets, right? So what's that noise level going to be? What vaccinations do they require for pet owners? And again, what's the hygiene level there? Because you want to make sure that, you know, while your pet is waiting for pickup or while it's waiting to dry off or whatever, that it's not being exposed unnecessarily to icky stuff, right? So you want to make sure that when you're getting to know your groomer, again, take that tour, okay? Ask them in depth, what services do they provide? Do they have particular groomers that are specialized in certain things versus other things? Can you stay and watch? This is going to be key. I personally like to be the creeper person that like stands on the other side of the window and it's like barely glancing, where my dog doesn't see me and is not distracted, but I can see what's going on. So those groomers that have their grooming stations right out there in the open, awesome. All right. But again, making sure that there's no safety concerns there. Are a bunch of people going to be walking back and forth? Other dogs going to be walking back and forth while your dog is being groomed? Is that going to be an issue? What experience do they have with your dog's breed? Do you have a long-haired dog? Do you have a wiry? Do you have a dog with very sensitive skin? What experience do they have with that? Ask them about their handling philosophy and techniques. There are fear-free groomers out there. If they're not certified, maybe they have a different type of that low-stress handling. You can get into that. Are your staff trained in body language and behavior? There are many times where animals will shut down from extreme stress, and it can be mistaken for being calm, but it's the furthest thing. And it's heartbreaking to see a dog that's completely shut down because it is stressed out of its mind. So having a groomer that understands the signs leading up to that and what that looks like and can give your pet a break, can take those steps back, is going to be very, very important. If something goes wrong, are people trained in first aid and CPR? What other training have they received? And what continuing education do they continue with? Now, looking at doggy daycares, this is a big question that not many people think about. Is doggy daycare a good choice for your dog? Because not very many dogs love all dogs. Most dogs fall into that dog selective. Okay, they're just like people. We like some people, I wouldn't say that I love everybody, that I would want to spend an entire day locked in a room with a bunch of strangers. Okay, that's not my jam. I have a couple friends that would really enjoy that, put them in a cocktail room with a, bunch of weirdos that they can interact with all day, and they're happy as a clam. Me, I got a few friends that I like hanging out with, and that's about it. So a quality daycare is going to offer an evaluation of all the dogs coming into the facility to make sure that they're going to be okay around other dogs, that there's not going to be any aggressive issues. Full disclosure, my dogs went through a lot of change when we moved up here. We tried to find them a new doggy daycare thinking that would help. They failed their evaluations. They went through too much change in too little amount of time. And they're like, nope, we don't want to meet new people. We don't want to meet new dogs. This is too much. We're out. And I was very grateful that the staff was honest with me, because my dogs would have been absolutely miserable and they could have caused an injury and I would have felt terrible. So I'm glad they failed their evaluation versus that facility just being, oh, cha-ching, please give us your money and we'll shove them in a kennel. Hope nothing goes wrong. Fingers crossed. Okay. So you definitely want to ask how they do those evaluations and what they're looking for. These are very, very unregulated. So you want to look for those quality reviews. Again, don't just look at the 5 and 1 stars, look at the ones in the middle, because that's going to give you a better idea, and talk to people. Talk to people about how their dogs are at the end of the day. Are their dogs happy? Do their dogs want to go into the building? That's going to be a key, because if somebody has to drag their dog across the parking lot to get them into the building, that's a sign the dog doesn't enjoy it. And it might be the dog, it might be the facility. Recommendations from a trainer are going to be great as well. So a lot of these questions are going to be figuring out which one is your best fit. So what's the vaccination spay neuter policy? I personally don't want my dogs around unspayed females or unneutered dogs. They go a little crazy around those hormones, and I don't like who they become. So I prefer facilities that have a strict spay neuter policy. Again, that may not be everybody's preference. How many dogs are playing at the same time? What's the staff to dog ratio? Because looking at all of these gorgeous dogs, that's a manageable amount of dogs for 1 to 2 people. But what if that's only half the room and there's one person guarding what might be 25 dogs? That's a lot. How are you possibly going to keep your eyeballs on all 25 dogs? Are they separated by size? How long do they play? Do they get rest periods? What does the play space look like? Ask for a tour, okay? What happens during play breaks? Where do the dogs go? What's going on? Are they trained in that body language and behavior to prevent issues from occurring? If something happens, do they know first aid and CPR? And if a fight breaks out, what's their policy? What about an injury? And then what about toy and treat policies? Some animals are perfectly fine around other dogs until a squeaky tennis ball comes out. And then it's all about the war, not about the peace. And then what is their cleanup protocol? Our one in Tampa, I loved how often they cleaned. I hated how my dog smelled when he got home because he stank like disinfectant. So I knew he was clean, but he was very unfortunately disinfected a lot because the floor was disinfected and then he'd roll on the floor or play on the floor and come up with that. So something to keep in mind. It's a little thing, but you notice it after a while. Okay. So that's all I have for you tonight, folks. I'm going to stick around for questions. So if you have any, feel free to throw them into the chat. Thank you so much for joining me. We do have some upcoming webinars and events. I want to highlight this weekend, this Saturday from 10 to 2, we have a Home for the Holidays cat and kitten adoption event. So adoption fees are half off, and we will have all of our cats and kittens out of foster care at the shelter. If you're looking to add a feline friend or interested in fostering, you can give us a call and get an appointment. We are doing them with reservations just to help with crowd control. Coming up in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about Pet Training 101. and what we can do and when to ask for help. Coming into the new year, that first week, we'll have canine concerns. So those problems that we sometimes face, common issues that we face with our dogs and what we can do about them. And then at the end of the month, we're going to have a brand new program called Helping Homeless Pets. So what you can do if you find a stray dog, or how to be an advocate to help homeless pets, even if you don't have one right in your home right then. Okay, so I hope you all will join me. That information will be on our website shortly so that you can register, as well as going out in our newsletter next week. And let's see if we have any questions. All right. All right. So I did forget to throw my email up on there. That is my bad. So I'm going to throw it in the chat. It is humane@education@dupageco.org. You can always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at any time. You can also reach the shelter. The phone number is 630-407-2800. I'm throwing that into the chat as well. We're here to answer questions. Our goal is that every pet stays in a loving home. That is our goal. So if you are having issues, we are more than happy to talk to you about what we have. And we are also more than happy to refer you on to experts if we don't have the answers ourselves. All right, folks, I don't see any particular questions. Like I said, you can always reach out to me via email and by phone if you have questions in the future. If they strike you later on, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Please do fill out that program survey. Love to hear your feedback and any ideas you have for future programs. Thank you so much, everyone.